In the early part of the 80s, it had been reported that a small number of men from California and New York were being diagnosed with rare forms of cancer and pneumonia. Medics were baffled about what was happening to these people, and the only thing they had in common was they were all gay. Because of this, it required names like gay cancer, gay immune deficiency, and GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. But it became very clear, very early on, that it wasn't just homosexual men who had been affected by this. Intravenous drug users were also being affected. In 1982, the syndrome was given the acronym AIDS, Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome, and in 1983, two researchers working independently discovered a reason for this syndrome. It was down to a novel retrovirus called HIV, Human Immunodeficiency Virus. Since its discovery, HIV has been extensively researched. We know its life cycle, we know its genetic structure, we know a lot about it. But unbelievably, there are people out there who don't believe it exists, or they don't believe that it doesn't cause AIDS. Some of these people are extremely vocal. Some have organised concerts, others have wrote literature, and others make documentary films, like House of Numbers. The movie is trying to pass itself off as almost like a Michael Moore-esque documentary. One guy struggled to try and find something out. In this case, does HIV exist, and does it cause AIDS? But nothing could be further from the truth, which I'm going to discuss in this mini-series. Now, a few of you out there are probably thinking, what am I doing in a graveyard? Well, can you think of a better place to start your incredibly sensitive documentary about a life-threatening illness?
I was born in 1980, a year before AIDS exploded onto the public consciousness. I grew up beneath its shadow like a child raised under the threat of the mushroom cloud. You might say I am a member of the first HIV/AIDS generation. I've never known a world without it. This film is an account of my journey through the shifting sand surrounding HIV/AIDS. AIDS has been front-page news for nearly 30 years. Yet how much do any of us really know about HIV and AIDS?
The film was directed, produced and starred Canadian-born Brent Leon, a psychology graduate from the University of British Columbia. Now, the documentary is poor, even from a technical standpoint. It's poorly organised, unfocused, and repeatedly and comedically punctuated by clips of Brent in strange locations.
Why nearly 3 decades since its discovery does there continue to be debate over HIV? I visited the World Health Organization's website searching for answers and discovered there are currently more than 12 different definitions of AIDS worldwide. It was becoming clear that HIV and AIDS were distinct, separate entities. And what we found? There are no numbers, only assumptions and estimates. Growing up in the age of AIDS, I was taught there were 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and contracting HIV from unprotected sex. On the other hand, HIV allegedly occurs in the United States as well. Gelderblum's images, said to come from isolated HIV cultures, provided no proof for HIV's existence. People around the globe were just as confused as I was.
Now, I know I'm no Quentin Tarantino, James Cameron, Alfred Hitchcock, or Tommy Wiseau, but I know how to put a video together. This documentary is a mess. Why do you keep telling me who these people are, Brett? Why do you keep doing this? Wait, who is this again? Oh, it's Christine Magia. Oh, wait, who is she again? Oh, yeah, it's Christine Magia. Winner of 13 international awards? Really? But don't take my word on how much of a mess this documentary is. And I suggest that you buy your own copy of it from Pirate Bay. Now, before I start, this review of this movie, I want to make a little bit of a disclaimer, which is that I'm not going to have time to cover everything in this movie. There's just simply too much. But I am going to stick to the main points that are brought up, and I'm going to show how deceitful Brent is, how the people in this documentary are liars, and how this movie poses a real health danger. But this video, I'm going to talk about vital information that was actually missing from the film. You see, the documentary starred a woman called Christine Magia, who tested positive for HIV in 1992. In the movie, Christine talks about her experiences with the HIV tests and HIV medication. She casts a shadow on HIV tests by saying,
I'm very much opposed to the concept of mandatory testing of any population because the tests are scientifically shown to be unreliable and inaccurate.
Unbelievably, later on she encourages people who tested positive for HIV to stop taking their medication, as she believes it caused the death of 8 of her co-workers.
I remember in 1992, after I first tested positive, I became involved in an organization called Women at Risk. There were 11 of us at the time on the board and involved in the group. All of us except 3 were on the medications. In the year and a half that I was involved with Women at Risk, every single woman in that organization on the drugs died. Every single one, except the 3 of us who weren't taking them.
Now, Christine has no medical or scientific background, which begs the question, why is she the one in this movie saying that you should stop taking your HIV medication? It probably has something to do with the fact that no one with a medical or scientific background would ever say something so incredibly stupid. At first, I thought it was very cruel of Brent to have Christine in this film. She came across as a very scared woman who was simultaneously trying to make sense of what was happening to her and conflictingly trying to pretend nothing was. Her segments were emotionally charged, and at one point she broke down into tears.
When I was told I was HIV positive, I accepted that on a very deep level. But only by having the courage, the open minds, and the open hearts to answer these questions are we ever going to know how to help people, how to do what we need to do to help people.
It almost seemed as if she was some random person off the street that Brent picked up to be in his documentary. Although Christine was saying the most horrific and dangerous things on film, part of me still felt sorry for her. But all that quickly changed when I did a little bit of research about her. Christine is not some random, uninformed woman off the street. She was the founder of the AIDS Denialist organization Alive and Well with AIDS Alternatives. The organization believes AIDS is not a major problem in Africa, and that the current epidemic is nothing more than fear-mongering from the pharmaceutical industry. They also believe that HIV tests are inaccurate and help develop legal strategies for over 50 HIV-positive mothers to avoid having their children tested or treated for HIV. Unlike a lot of people with crazy views out there, Christine stood by hers. Whilst pregnant, Christine refused to take any antiviral medication which could have reduced the risk of mother-to-child transmission of HIV during her pregnancies. She also breastfed her children, even though she was aware of studies that showed that HIV can be transmitted by doing so. She refused to get her children tested for HIV and publicly stated on American TV that both her children had excellent records of health, and they've never had any respiratory problems, flus, intractable cold, ear infection, nothing. So our choice, however radical they may seem, are extremely well founded. 7 weeks after making these statements, her daughter died from an AIDS-related illness. An autopsy on the dead 3-year-old revealed that her thymus, a special organ of the immune system, was wasting away, which is consistent with HIV damage to the organ. P24 protein, a component of the HIV particle capsid, was discovered in her brain tissue, and she was underweight and under height, which is consistent with chronic illness. The coroner concluded that she had died of pneumocystis pneumonia in the setting of advanced AIDS. As you can imagine, Christine was not happy with the findings of the coroner, despite being shown a tape of the coroner explaining his findings. Christine refused to believe that her daughter had died of AIDS, and she's quoted as saying, "I'm devastated, broken, grieving mother, but I am not second-guessing or questioning my understanding of the issue." Christine had the autopsy reviewed by a fellow AIDS denialist, Dr. Mohammed Al-Bayati, who is the author of the book, Get the Facts, HIV Does Not Cause AIDS. He concluded that her daughter died from an allergic reaction to amoxicillin. It should be noted here that the good doctor is not a medical doctor. He has a PhD in animal disease pathology. The fact that she's willing to believe a vet instead of a medical professional shows how desperate she was to be told that the death of her child was not her fault. The results of the autopsy have since been presented to an independent medical examiner, who agreed with the initial report that it was an AIDS-related illness and not amoxicillin that killed the 3-year-old. Now this all happened in 2005, 4 years before this film was released, and before she got interviewed for it. The woman we are seeing here on film is not only lost a child to AIDS, but was responsible for her increased risk, her lack of diagnosis, and lack of treatment. Yet unbelievably, here she is saying that you should stop taking your medication and there is no link between HIV and AIDS. The fact that she has the balls to be in this documentary and continue giving out the same dangerous advice that contributed to her own daughter's death leads me to believe that she is broken.
But only by having the courage, the open minds, and the open hearts to answer these questions, are we ever going to know how to help people, how to do what we need to do to help people?
There is no doubt in my mind that Brent must have been aware of the death of Christine's daughter, yet this vital piece of information is missing from the documentary. It shows that Brent is cherry-picking the evidence and what he talks about that backs up his own views on HIV/AIDS. It shows that the documentary is not, as Brent said, an objective examination of the ideas that HIV causes AIDS, but instead a distortion of reality that can, and probably has, led to the death and suffering of many people. Now I know some of you who might be watching this might be saying to yourself, Myles, never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. It's true that Brent could be one of the stupidest documentary filmmakers out there. It's possible that he took Christine's claims at face value and did not do any background check or further research of her claims. He could truly believe that coming off HIV medication can help you and make you live longer and healthier because he has not seen any evidence that contradicts it. However, the last 10 seconds of the documentary show that Brent was aware of the dangers of coming off the medication and that he is more than willing to leave out yet more vital information that contradicts his ludicrous theories. The end credits say, the filmmakers acknowledge with sadness the passing of 3 generous contributors to House of Numbers before the completion of the film. And there are 3 names followed by the line, their deaths were unrelated to HIV. One of the people listed was Christine Magyar. She died before this film was released. Her death certificate stated that the cause of death was disseminated herpes virus infection and bilateral pneumonia with oral candidiasis as a contributing cause, all of which can be related to HIV infection. So to recap, the woman who Brent had in his film telling people to come off the HIV medication and who cast a shadow on HIV tests had a daughter who died before the documentary was even filmed. She then herself also died from AIDS-related illnesses, ahead of the film's release. All of this vital information is missing in the dialogue of the film, and the only reference to Christine's death is in the final 10 seconds of the credits. I honestly don't know how Brent sleeps at night knowing he's made this film. Now I was going to end this video right about here, but I actually found something quite interesting out whilst researching this Christine Magyar. And really it came from me having this really unsettling feeling that I've heard of this all before. I've heard of her and I've heard of her organisation, Alive and Well with AIDS Alternatives. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but then suddenly it just came to me. I remember reading about this back in 2002 when I was still at college because it was on my favourite band at the time's website, the Foo Fighters. As unbelievable as this sounds, the Foo Fighters were once heavily promoting the theory that HIV does not cause AIDS, and that AIDS does not exist. Not only did they have a link to an AIDS denialist page on their sidebar, but they proudly had a relatively large banner at the bottom of their front page linking to the website that said, if you've ever lived or loved in fear of AIDS, click here for a reality check, and to find out what the AIDS establishment isn't telling you. Although the old website is long gone, it can still be found using the Wayback Machine. When you click on the banner, it takes you to an AIDS denialist page on the Foo Fighters website. It says that the band has come out in support of Alive and Well with AIDS Alternatives, an organisation dedicated to helping open the dialogue concerning AIDS. And it had a list of good reasons for good people to question AIDS.
And I'd like to call for a moratorium on the unnecessary fear. This constant promotion of AIDS is a growing problem. When you look at the facts, it is not. It is not.
I'm curious how Foo Fighters got involved in this.
Christine wrote a book. What if everything you thought you knew about AIDS was wrong? And I found the book and read it and was intrigued.
I think that most people have been scared of AIDS. I think that most people have been sort of force-fed the idea of a death sentence.
Are you afraid of AIDS?
Am I afraid of AIDS? No. Because I'm here with Alive and Well.
So are you afraid of AIDS, Taylor?
This is making me not so afraid, actually.
And, believe it or not, back in the day, the Foo Fighters even organised a gig to actually support Alive and Well. They actually did a lot of work with Christine herself.
I'm living in perfect health without any AIDS medicines.
Even though the band has now removed all links from their website, they haven't openly came out and stated that they no longer believe in this garbage.
No doubt in my mind there will be people out there who have suffered and who have died by listening to these people, both the Foo Fighters and Christine Magyar. And because of this, I say with every fibre of my being, fuck you guys. You are disgusting people.